Alright, good morning.
Good morning.
We're continuing where we left off last week.
Yes.
Baruch Hashem. Let me just recap for those who weren't here or those who need a refresher.
Okay.
We were going through the different worldviews of both Rabbi Kook, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi pre the state of Israel, and Rabbi Uziel, who was the Sephardic chief rabbi pre and post the founding of the state of Israel. By the way, if anybody wants hot drinks, tea, I put out sugar. The teas are in the cabinet on top. Please feel free to help yourself.
Good morning.
And we were going to take some hot topics in their writings that are very relevant and applicable to today, and analyze them on a deeper level. See why are they differing? What do they differ on? And we started with the issue of conversion. Rav Kook makes a statement. The statement is that if somebody converts with the knowledge in mind that I will not keep all of the mitzvot in the Torah, this person is not only not converted, they're not even Jewish. They don't even count as anything. They're a non-Jew like they were before. Rav Kook says any rabbi who marries a couple of such converts, so on and so forth, will be doing a sin greater than he can bear. And along comes Rabbi Uziel. And Rabbi Uziel says, listen, I see your ideal picture. What is a convert? Someone who's going to jump the whole ship, take it all on board. Fine, but what about practically? We have situations which arise. And the question is, what do you do with a couple that's, one of them is Jewish and one's not Jewish? What do you do with the children of such a couple? Do you really make it so difficult for them to join the Jewish people? Do you or do you not? Rav Kook said, absolutely. Why do I need to lower my standards to cater to someone else's problem? Rabbi Uziel says, and this is the last statement we'll read on page 3. Rabbi Uziel ended up saying, it's the second to last paragraph on page 3, and I fear
that if we push them, children, away completely by not accepting their parents for conversion, we shall be brought to judgment, and they shall say to us, you did not bring back those who were driven away, and those who were lost you did not seek.
He says, Rabbi Uziel, I'm afraid of the ramifications of what does it mean when I as a rabbi say, I don't want to accept you. What does that mean? What am I really saying? Sure, I'm saying I don't want to lower my standards. Says Rabbi Uziel, but what about all those people that are going to be lost?
It's a rejection.
It is a rejection. Says Rav Kook, but I'm allowed to reject it, so I don't have to lower my standards for you.
It's not it.
Well, or being very diligent on Torah matters. Rabbi Uziel says, listen, with all due respect to your ideal, I also want that ideal. I want that every convert that joins the Jewish people should do so, not because they want to marry somebody Jewish, not because they're already with somebody Jewish, not because they had kids with somebody Jewish. I want them to come because they really want to join the Jewish people. But says Rabbi Uziel, practically, that's not always the case. And just because of that, the desire comes from a wrong place. Does that mean that I'm going to reject the family? Does that mean that I'm going to be willing to say no to somebody who's sincerely trying to join, even though the reasons may not be so deep or so worthy? Yeah.
It's interesting because we have to understand that Rabbi Kook was not very strict on many other things.
Exactly.
So we have to understand because, for example, when Shmat Shmita, he was the one that he said that Atem Mitchazdim v'Davka b'Noseh hazeh.
Right.
So
this is an important point.
Context because he was not that strict. So if he's strict here.
This is an important point that Rachel is bringing up. Rav Kook is known in the pages of history as one of the more open-minded, liberal, tolerant rabbis that ever lived. Rav Uziel, I won't say the opposite about him, but Rav Kook seems to be that persona. You go to Jewish history and say, wow, where is there a person that was open-minded, that was willing to come towards people, that was willing to not change halacha, but adapt halacha to the situation of Jews today? That was Rav Kook. The students of Rav Kook say, our rabbi's teachings are the teachings that will bring the redemption. That's what the students of Rav Kook say.
Teaching of the future.
Yeah, this is a Torah HaGoelet. That's what they call it. Somehow the students of Rav Uziel have either disappeared or been persecuted as not being mainstream. Rav Uziel has come to tell you something important. He's saying, what about the whole picture? What about the family here that's at risk? What about the children? What about the children whose father might not be Jewish? And they want to stay married. They don't want to ruin their family unit. So why push them to break up? Why push them? Maybe you could just help them along the road of conversion. Or the opposite is true in an even more severe case where the mother wasn't Jewish.
If the
And then the
father
children-
isn't Jewish, but the mother is, the
The
kids
children are Jewish.
Yeah.
But what if the father also wants, for example, this happens all the time. What if it comes time for a bar mitzvah? And now this father sends his kids to Jewish school. I had a student, and I don't know if it's a strange thing for you to hear. The mother was a devout Jew and the father was a Catholic.
Yes.
And they live together. Don't ask me how and what goes on at their Shabbat table. But this father, he paid for Orthodox Jewish school for these children's whole life. He sent them to yeshiva. That's where I met the student. And so now what happens to this kid's bar mitzvah? At the end of the day, the father won't be able to go up there to the bima and get an aliyah. He won't be part. And maybe he didn't try to convert. But what about a case where a father would try to convert? Do we make it easier for him? Do we help him out? Why should I help somebody out just because they had a kid with somebody Jewish? What is my responsibility towards this
We're all
couple?
people. But we're all people.
That's okay. So I'm happy to invite you to the synagogue. I'm happy but to convert? Why should I convert somebody like
But
that?
it's a difference between the man and the woman, because when you convert a woman, you want to know that she would be the one to transmit, right?
The same thing with a man.
No.
Yeah.
No, because the kids
We don't
are Jewish.
find though in Judaism that there's a different standard between men and women when it comes to conversion. We don't find such a thing. Maybe logically what you're saying makes sense, but
The
halachically.
kids are Jewish automatically because the mother is Jewish.
So what about the
We don't
father?
have a problem with converting the father.
What do you mean we don't have a problem?
Because if he
We'll
doesn't
we'll
need-
convert the father just like we convert the
That's what I'm
mother.
saying, because he doesn't need to convert and he wants to convert, it's easier to convert.
But why does he want to convert? Not because he really wants to convert.
How do you know?
But how do you know?
I'm telling you, he's telling you he does not want. He wants to convert because he wants to be part of the whole Jewish thing. You know, he wants.
And that's not good enough?
He doesn't want to be a Torah observer Jew, just like his wife isn't.
I think it depends on, let's say the wife is Jewish, or he's going to marry into a Jewish family. It depends on how Jewish they are. If they're all Jewish and it all makes a difference to them, and he wants to please the mother-in-law, the father-in-law, the aunts, his wife.
So tell me
then
about
he's
this
gonna
person.
Consider to.
Tell me about this person. When he would come to rabbinic court, are they going to treat him differently because he's going to marry a Jew?
Yes, they will.
No, they won't.
No, the reality of today is they won't.
They won't.
Because Rav Kook's view prevails. Because like I told you last week, Rav Kook's view is the mainstream view that came out of Eastern Europe. And this is the view that runs the court system around the world, not just in the official courts, unofficially. That's what people think. When you think of conversion, that's what you think of. If it was so easy to convert, you wouldn't have so many problems like these. Maybe you'd have new problems. Could be you'd have other problems. I'm not saying, sometimes you try to close up one hole over here, you open up another hole over there. Could be, but we didn't go there yet.
Rabbi, as I've observed young people's American families, where they're mixed marriages, if you will, where the woman is Jewish, and before they get married, their Italian or whatever husband agrees that the children could be raised Judaically, is going to go to Hebrew school, have a bar mitzvah, do all that stuff. It doesn't seem to be a big deal for them that the husband can't go up to the bima on, for an aliyah at the bar mitzvah.
Right.
It's not a big thing for them. They've decided in their family unit that they're Jewish enough. They don't care about that.
Right.
It
That's
doesn't
fine.
matter that they can't have the bar mitzvah in Israel right in front of the kotel. They're happy to go around.
What about for someone that it does bother them? Listen, they've been with her for 20 years now. It's a bad time for their son's wedding. They're like, you know what? I'm not against. Clearly, I've been more involved in the Jewish thing than I have. Most non-Jewish men who are married to Jewish people who are sending their kids to Hebrew school are probably not so involved in their whatever family religion they come from. And so he's like, listen, 20 years I'm paying membership to, I don't know, whatever synagogue they go to. Maybe I really want to join the fold. See, there's another problem, especially in this country. In Israel, when you don't accept someone for conversion, so just they don't convert. That's tough. There's no other way to do it in Israel. In America, when you as a Beit Din won't accept somebody for conversion, they'll go to the conservative movement. They'll go to the reform movement.
Correct.
They'll go to the Reconstructionist movement.
Correct.
They'll go wherever they need to go to be considered Jewish. And guess what's going to happen? That family will now either be lost entirely to this Torah observant community who was working so hard on keeping people in their fold. They just lost this family. Or what you've done is something else. What happens when that mother converts? in a conversion that for us doesn't follow halachic protocol.
When the children decide
And then those
married,
children,
that's when the trouble
they find themselves at Chabad
That's
in
right.
Jerusalem or at
Correct.
Esha Torah somewhere, and then they get a wake up call. Wait a second, I'm not even Jewish.
That's right.
Why am I not Jewish? Because my parents went to the Reform rabbi to get converted, because the Orthodox rabbi wouldn't do it, because we came from... And then you have to ask yourself the question, so my being strict on that conversion, was it worth what happened now? Some would say yes,
In the big picture.
because we didn't lower our standards again. And some would say maybe not. I don't know. Is that really the way it works?
Did you?
It seems like I don't have any answers. I mean, halakhically, it's all very problematic. But it seems like there's really two different categories of people. There are people who are just wanting to convert because they want to convert, and there's no other issues. And
Everyone agrees that that person we would accept.
Right.
So, right?
Yes.
Everyone agrees.
So the issues, there's no issues with them. There are issues with people who have families. So it seems like it's a whole other category when you're thinking about conversion and the rules and how you apply. And there's many more ramifications of it's the person, but it's not the person and his wife, and his kids and his grandkids and his whoever else. It's like a different kind of situation. I don't know what the answer is. If you could really apply the black and white yes and no, or if you have to really look at the whole big picture, and I don't know where that would lead, but it is a different situation.
Absolutely. The question is, does that carry weight halachically? Or is that just an interesting thing to
But
keep
it's
in
not
mind when you say no?
interesting, because look, it affects that generation, the next generation, the next generation. It has it's like a pebble that has all these ripples.
It ripples it.
But it already. I'm sorry. I just was thinking about it. It already happened. I mean, well, anyway, when the Shaar happened, even people that were not considered Jewish for us, obviously Hitler, the Nazis considered them Jewish.
Because it's even the Russian. The father was Jewish. That they wrote in their passport whatever, so they're Jewish.
This is the famous precedent for Israel's right of return, where Israel decided that you don't need to follow halachic guidelines to consider someone Jewish, but who is a Jew? Somebody who Hitler would have killed had they been alive then. And what that did was bring a whole new generation of people to Israel who are not actually Jewish, but came under the right of return.
Correct.
Now what Israel is dealing with is, what do we do with the children of these people?
Correct.
Now they're integrated into Israeli society. They have Hebrew names, they went to Hebrew schools, they're all Israeli, they serve in the army, they work in the same places we work at. What do you do with these children? These children say, listen, we came here because we want to be part of the Jewish people. But we don't really want.
They wanted out of Russia.
We don't really want to join Judaism. We kind of want to join the Jewish people.
Well, you can't do that.
Can you do that?
No, you can't be. You can't be a Jew and not be a Jew at the same time.
Oh, how many people
But
there
we
are?
are. But there's so many people that are.
If you're born that way, you can't.
I can
be Jewish.
Right.
Yes, but I can tell you that how many convertees that get converted and get married, whether it be male or female, I don't care which way it is. And then they get married in whatever shul it is. And then 10 years down the road, and what do you see?
Well, do you remember Rabbi Kook dealt with the situation? Where was it? On page 2? Rabbi Kook was asked about the situation.
That's only in the Orthodox
One
world,
second.
though, Avril. It doesn't exist in the Reform or Conservative world.
Why?
I mean, it's
Get out
just,
of that world, it might, those
if they shift into the Orthodox world.
That's where the
But a lot
Rav Kook
but a
does
lot
say
of
on
them
page
don't.
2,
A lot of them just stay,
Rav Kook on page 2
particularly
says, what about a convert who converts? And when they converted, they really meant it. And then, life took its toll and
That's
things.
right.
Because that person is Jewish. Of course they're Jewish. Because when they converted, they meant the right thing. Ask the other way around though. What about a person who converted without the right intentions? But then over time they find themselves getting closer and closer and closer to Judaism. And you convert them now, hoping that maybe later in life they will get more involved in their Jewish practice. Rav Kook says that conversion is completely invalid. That person is not even Jewish. Rabbi Uziel says, ideally I wouldn't convert such a person, but there are calculations which we take into consideration in order to convert such a couple. Let's see what how Rabbi Angel summarizes these two discussions. Let's look at the bottom of page 3.
There's a case right now in Israel which is very strange. Do you know about it? This woman who actually is Jewish.
Yes.
And they don't consider her Jewish.
Right. Her child is not considered Jewish.
Why?
I did not totally understand it. Because she has some grandparents.
I can explain it to you very simply.
What is it?
It's the other way around somehow.
This has nothing to do with what we're discussing right now.
The rabbinical court says she is Jewish,
Right.
but the state says
So here's how this
she's
works.
not. And I didn't understand this.
You know, sometimes they have something called bureaucracy.
Yes.
You know what that is?
No.
Anyone ever heard of this word before?
No. Especially among Jews.
Jews are the kings of this word. We have invented it. We made all the rules for it. We even made the rule that says that this rule doesn't have any rules. It's just no, that was the Jewish people. See, there's an interesting relationship between the state of Israel and the chief rabbinate of Israel, and that is the state of Israel, upon its founding, decided that the chief rabbinate of Israel was going to be its go-to source for everything Jewish. And the state of Israel accepted the rabbinate as being their rabbinate. By the way, the anti-Zionistic Orthodox Jews viewed that as like the kosher stamp. You know, like they needed rabbis so they could feel legitimized, right? But that's a cute discussion for a different time. The ironic part, though, is that sometimes the chief rabbinate doesn't accept stances that the state of Israel has. And sometimes the state of Israel passes laws forcing the chief rabbinate to do things religiously that the chief rabbinate doesn't want to do.
Correct.
And that's the problem, by the way, when you don't have a separation of church and state, is that ideally in a Jewish world there shouldn't be a separation because those two know how to function in a functional way. They don't infringe on people's private, personal rights, but they also work together to ensure that there's a standard, a government standard, not a subjective standard. On the other hand, it can make many problems. So normally what you have are people who come to Israel, and the state of Israel says, "Oh, you're not." The state of Israel says, "Oh, you're Jewish because your great grandfather was Jewish, and if it was in Russia, then Hitler would have killed your family." And the chief rabbinate says, with all due respect, for us, that doesn't make somebody Jewish. That may make them Jewish enough to make Aliyah, but not Jewish enough to be considered Jewish and get married in a rabbinic court or anything along those lines. You very rarely have what Tamar just mentioned, which is the other case, the other way around. The other way around is what happens when the chief rabbinate accepts somebody to be Jewish. It sounds very funny. And the state of Israel says that they're not Jewish. Well, let me tell you what that means. When you come to Israel, you have to label yourself as to what religion you belong to.
Correct.
Muslims are Muslims.
You mean if you make Aliyah?
Yeah. Or if you live there. When you're born, Druze are Druze, Jews are Jews, Christians are Christians. Let's say your ID says Christian. It doesn't actually print it on you, but it's there in the files. Anyone who needs to look.
By the way, they changed the law. They no longer
have to.
the religion.
Okay, I don't know what ramifications, by the way, this has now.
Yeah.
But for this lady, it makes problems because when she made Aliyah from, where did she make Aliyah from? Somewhere in Europe.
Yeah.
Somewhere in Europe, she made Aliyah to Israel, and the state of Israel said, "Was your mother Jewish?" She said, "Yes, I can prove to you." She proved her mother is Jewish. The rabbinate says, "Good, you're Jewish." The state of Israel says, but your mother belongs to some group that she converted into, the equivalent, like the European equivalent of Jews for Jesus.
What?
Say, so your mother is a Christian. So the state of Israel labeled her mother as a Christian,
Oh my God.
and labeled this daughter as no religion. Because she claims to not be a Christian, but the state of Israel says, we don't know if you're Jewish anymore because your mother's a Christian, so they labeled her as no religion.
That's bureaucracy.
Now here's the
That
problem.
was some person.
Here's the problem. Now this lady wants to get engaged and get married.
She's married.
So she's married.
She's married to an Israeli.
But they did a ceremony not in the chief rabbinate, probably. Well, let's leave her story.
Fly to Greece and get married.
Okay.
That's the problem.
Now she's coming to the chief rabbinate and says, I want to get married. Can I get married here? They said, well, according to us, you can get married here because you're Jewish. But according to the state of Israel, you're not Jewish. And so in which case, we can't legally perform a marriage for you, even though religiously we could. Meaning it's the equivalent of having a religious marriage, but not getting your civil marriage license. So forget about it. Who needs you? We'll just get married with our own rabbi, and we won't register with you. But now listen to the problem. Now this couple is expecting. and this baby is going to be born. And the state of Israel is adamant that this baby is not Jewish. And the mother is saying, but I'm Jewish. So she brought a letter from the chief rabbinate. The chief rabbinate says, we testify this lady is Jewish like every other Jew in the whole world. And the state of Israel says, with all due respect to the chief rabbinate, this lady is not Jewish. She has to first go through a conversion. So the chief rabbinate says, we cannot convert somebody who's already Jewish. So the chief rabbinate denies doing a conversion for her. They reject her conversion appeal because she's already Jewish. The state of Israel, they rejected you for conversion, so you're not Jewish. So now this child's going to be born.
And it's going to be a mamzer.
And no, not a mamzer. Not at all. It's just going to say on the papers, no religion.
That's terrible. That's a terrible.
How often does that happen? Is
This is the first time in my life I ever heard of such a story.
Yeah, so we're talking about things that don't happen every single
Right,
day.
right.
And I think there probably are a lot of families that get married here, Christian-Jewish mix, and maybe, have their children here, and then they make Aliyah to Israel. And they declare themselves as Jewish. What are they going to do? Say you're not?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of details. That's the problem.
If you say,
What's the word?
you have to, but if you say that,
You have to prove that you're Jewish. I wouldn't be able to prove I'm Jewish. What documents would I
it's
prove?
like a political choice in a way.
You don't have a tuba when you got married.
Right, not for the state of Israel.
Your parents
I didn't get married by a rabbi.
On their lawn, they made up.
No.
All right, let's get back to our article, though,
I'm going
please.
to say, go have it.
Page 3 at the bottom of the page.
Wasn't,
Yes, of course.
wasn't framed and in the house.
Your parents got married.
You need one?
Yeah, so that's a proof.
That's a proof. That's a
Okay, page 3 at the bottom of the page.
Take a picture of the gravestone.
Yes, they do.
That goes against every rebellious bone in my body. I would want to say for the state of Israel, something not I won't say at this table.
Thank you.
I think there are a lot more important issues going on in Israel.
Yeah.
Well, this issue, by the way, this issue is taken over the whole topic of the state. I know it might not seem like a big issue to you, but this issue is going to be at the root of the next elections in the state of Israel.
Wonderful.
This issue about conversion and who can convert and what can convert, it's a huge. You have, like we told you last week, over 350,000 citizens of the state of Israel who are considered no religion. Because it's a standoff. It's like between the government and the chief rabbinate. Do we convert them? Do we not? Because
Didn't the problem started when they changed the law of Jewish?
sure, but now you have the problem. So I mean, even though you can blame them for the problem, now you have to deal with the problem. What can we do? So let's look at the bottom of page 3. See, whereas Rabbi Kook saw the acceptance of mitzvot as the, I don't even know how to read that word. There you go, entering the Jewish fold. Rabbi Uziel thought it was not an absolute requirement at all. Whereas Rabbi Kook believed that the mitzvot are the defining feature of the Jewish people, Rabbi Uziel stressed the importance of maintaining the wholeness of the Jewish people, even when the observance of mitzvot was deficient. The halachic difference between them can be apprehended on a deeper level if we consider their difference in hashkafa, in worldview. Before we go there, we just said something very, very dangerous. Rav Kook believes that the essence of being a Jew is Judaism, keeping Torah and mitzvot. Rabbi Uziel doesn't argue with the importance of keeping Torah and mitzvot. He's not a rabbi who believes you shouldn't keep Torah and mitzvot. Quite to the contrary. Rabbi Uziel, though, does believe something very interesting. Rabbi Uziel believes that it's not the only thing that makes a person Jewish. It's not the only thing. And you as a rabbi, you as a rabbinic court, as a Beit Din, you have an obligation to figure out how to keep the Jewish people whole. How to keep the Jewish people together. How to keep Jewish families in our tribe. If you can't persuade an intermarried couple to not be intermarried, so then you have to figure out a way to make sure that they're both part of the Jewish people. Not just one is part of the Jewish people. He knows that it's 11 o'clock and his mother's coming. He knows.
11. He always starts at 11.
If somebody wants, there's some milk in a bottle on the bookcase if you want to try to feed him. So the question here is like this. It's nice they both have these opinions, but where does this opinion stem from? Where is Rav Uziel getting his inspiration from? And where is Rav Kook picking up his inspiration from?
The same place.
Well, they're both using the same sources, like we saw, to come to two completely different conclusions.
Correct.
So there must be something in their worldview that changes the way they look at this story. So let's look at it together. We're going to analyze this on a deeper level. One level beyond halacha. And this theory, it's not theory, it's a approach. Anybody need this for their chair?
No. I have a question. You know, they always say that Jewish people have a neshama, but everybody has a neshama. Right.
Here you're getting into what is a neshama, why is a neshama,
Now, what's a special neshama?
what is a this is from a different department than I come from.
Right?
No, I'm not arguing with you. This is a different department.
Said the Jewish people have a special neshama.
What we're dealing with here is something that this theory, what we're going to do right now, this style of learning,
That's what makes them Jewish.
is very much disliked
Not better.
in many mainstream Jewish circles, which is, okay, so one rabbi had an opinion. But is his opinion purely objective? Or is it coming from some subjective place? Not that he changed the sources to mean what he wants it to say, but inevitably someone who feels a certain way in his life, when it comes to making conclusions, will always come to a certain place.
I agree with that. I mean, what we don't know about any of these rabbis is, on a day-to-day basis, what did they see when they walked to the shul? Who did they talk to?
We do know a lot about them.
Well, not necessarily, because I don't know what goes on in your mind. I don't know what you think when you observe your neighbors.
So these are two rabbis. What Paulette is saying is nice, and here's what's important. These two rabbis didn't just write these two opinions. They shared with us a wealth of Jewish knowledge. And through their other writings, you'll be able to find out what do they really think about certain issues. And then it will come to clarify here. So let's look at the next 2 or 3 paragraphs. We're going to first deal with Rabbi Kook, and then we're going to go back to Rabbi Uziel. Rabbi Kook, again, is the mainstream Jewish approach. Rabbi Uziel is the mainstream Sephardic approach. They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. My wife and I were speaking on Shabbat. It was very convenient for the Ashkenazi establishment to get rid of the Sephardic worldview, because it's very, very challenging to the approach they were trying to bring to the table. It was also very convenient for the Sfaradim to get rid of their worldview in order to be accepted by the establishment, and unfortunately that's the place where you are today. That's where you're standing today. In a place where today even the Sfaradim are fighting Rabbi Uziel. And that's absurd. That's absurd. But let's look at the act of conversion. Next paragraph. Who wants to read it for us?
The act of conversion, according to Rabbi Kook, requires the convert to join the soul of Knesset Yisrael, a metaphorical representation of the congregation of Israel. This can be accomplished only by total acceptance of the mitzvot, which are the essence of the Jewish soul. Rav Kook sees Knesset Yisrael as the highest spiritual manifestation of human existence. He propounds a notion found in Kabbalah, that there is an essential difference between Jews and non-Jews. Rav Kook writes.
Let's pause here. Rav Kook is going to tell us, he said one thing and he's going to tell us another thing. I'm asking you, before you get angry at Rav Kook, first listen to Rav Kook. Let's hear what Rav Kook has to say, and then you will find comfort in Rabbi Uziel's opinion. Okay? There are some of you that feel very much in touch with Rav Kook, and that's okay. You don't need to feel that anybody's against you. Please share your opinion with us also, at your own risk. Rav Kook is saying one thing. There's this metaphysical, Kabbalistic term called Knesset Yisrael. It means the collective soul of the Jewish people. In Rav Kook's writings, this idea comes up a lot, as it comes up in a lot of Kabbalistic writings, which is the Jewish people are not single individuals, but they're rather one collective group. And for a single individual on the outside to join this collective soul, they have to do something transformational for themselves. Not just say a few words in front of a rabbi, dunk in the mikveh, get a brit milah, and walk into the Jewish people. And that transformation is only accomplished the same way the Jewish people became a Knesset Israel, which is through the observance of mitzvot at Mount Sinai, when the Jewish people accepted the whole Torah on themselves. It says Rav Kook, this is what makes a person Jewish. It doesn't take away someone's Judaism or Jewishness when they're not there. But when one wants to join that collective soul, as on a fresh start, they have to transform themselves. Rav Kook is then going to go out on a limb here and quote from Kabbalah, his understanding of Kabbalah, which is that there is a very different there are two different beings in this world. One are Jews and one are non-Jews, essentially. please don't go here to anywhere racist with this. This is a Kabbalistic idea. But in essence, what Rav Kook is saying is that non-Jews and Jews are not just the same thing that do two different religions. Two completely different concepts, and in order for a non-Jew to become a Jew, that's possible. We let everyone join. But they have to do something transformational to reach there. Let's see what Rav Kook is going to say right now. Rabbi Kook writes, somebody? The difference
between the Jewish soul itself, its inner desires, aspirations, character and status, and that of all nations, at all their levels, is greater and deeper than the difference between the human soul and the animal soul. Between the latter, there is merely a quantitative distinction, but between the former, an essential qualitative distinction pertains.
By the way, every time you see a number, on the last page I put all the sources for you. You could look up where Rav Kook said this, where it comes from, what's the origin. This is from Rav Kook's book, Orot. Essentially, you should know that Rav Kook is telling you that there are, just like there's a division between animals and human beings, there's a division between human beings and the Knesset Yisrael, this collective soul of the Jewish people. And for a person to join that collective soul, it's possible. Everyone can do that. Everyone can transform. But it takes a lot to go through that transformation. Keep going. This is another quote from Rav Kook. Somebody else?
Each Jew is connected spiritually to Knesset Yisrael through the fulfillment of mitzvah and the ethical demands of the Torah. Now, the nourishment of the Jewish soul is the study of Torah in all its aspects, which also includes historical study of its fulfillment and the observance of the commandments with deep faith illuminated by the light of knowledge and clear awareness.
Again, Rav Kook is the Kabbalist, and so therefore he writes in Kabbalistic terms. Many of these English translations that look a little bit funny are translations of mainstream Kabbalistic terms. Rav Kook is saying, the nourishment of a Jewish soul is through Torah and mitzvot, and so how else do you expect someone to join this Knesset Yisrael without performing those Torah and mitzvot?
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
We were talking about being Jews that do not follow anything.
There's not enough.
Okay? I was born Jewish, but I don't follow anything.
Well, there are a lot of them out there.
Yeah. According to these definitions, this person is not Jewish.
So the answer to your question is twofold. One is that according to Kabbalah, you don't fall out of Judaism because you're falling out of Jewish tradition. Rather, you are falling out with your connection to the Jewish people. Meaning, you inevitably will feel left out of the picture. That's what Kabbalah believes. Unfortunately, though, this could explain to you, remember who was telling us that there are certain people who sat Shiva for their kids? Remember that?
Yes.
My family.
Could this not explain where they're coming from? This worldview?
Yes.
Which is that what makes you a Jew is not being born a Jew. What makes you a Jew is your active life as a Jew, and therefore it's very easy for somebody to fall out of being Jewish. Now you should know that what Rav Kook is saying is, again, mainstream Jewish tradition today. This is not Rabbi Uziel's approach, nor is it the approach of many other people. But we're sharing with you his side of the coin. And as we keep reading this, it's going to become clearer and clearer and clearer why Rav Kook believes that it's so hard to join the Jewish people. Because Rav Kook sees the Jewish people as something high, something lofty, something different. He says qualitatively different than everybody else in the world. And so to join that Knesset Yisrael, you're going to have to jump through some serious hoops.
It's kind of like saying we have limited enrollment in Harvard.
Yes.
And if you get into Harvard, you're in the in group. And everybody else doesn't really count.
Well, that doesn't really count.
Sort of.
That doesn't really count.
No.
But if they would want to get into Harvard, they're going to have to get their grades up. They're going to have to take some exams. They're going to have to wait on the waiting list. They're just going to have to do a lot of work to get in.
They are capable.
This is not community college. I don't know. This is it's different.
But the people in Harvard still need shoemakers. It's not that the other people don't have, right? It's not, but yes, it's
according to the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel, the other people don't really count.
Not don't count. They count as human beings, but not as Jews. There you go. So let's read in stressing.
In stressing the distinctiveness of the Jewish people and its essential difference from all other nations, Rav Kook appears to downplay the ethical universalism implicit in the classic Jewish teaching that human beings were created in the image of God.
Did you hear that sentence?
Yes.
Did you understand that sentence? Rav Kook is saying something that is based in Kabbalistic sources, but seemingly he's downplaying the very obvious notion in classic Jewish text that every human being was created in the image of God. It doesn't say Jews were created in the image of God, but every human being was created in the image of God. Let's keep reading.
And he believes that.
What?
He believed that.
Yes, but he's downplaying that.
Because he said that Ahavat Israel cannot be without Ahavat Adam.
That's true. But again, there's an Ahavat Israel and there's an Ahavat Adam. We'll see. Let's keep reading. You'll see what where we're getting at.
Instead of focusing on the universal spiritual dignity of all people, Rav Kook asserts a radical distinction between Israel and the nations. On the other hand, Rabbi Kook did recognize the existence of select individuals among the nations who can reach great spiritual heights. Whereas the supreme holiness specific to Israel is not shared by the nations. It is possible for individual non-Jews to imbue themselves with the holiness of Torah and to join the people of Israel.
Rav Kook is saying, I'm not closing the doors on the non-Jews. What I'm telling you is that you can join the Jewish people by, what is the word they use? By imbuing yourself with the holiness of the Torah, and therefore joining the holiness of the Jewish people.
Yes.
But that, my friends, doesn't happen overnight. And that's not going to happen just because you want to marry a Jewish girl. And that's not just going to happen because your father was Jewish. And that's not going to happen for any other reason aside from the fact that you want to imbue yourself with the holiness of Torah and join the Jewish people. Okay. Rabbi Kook's hashkafa thus plays itself out in the halachic issue of conversion. For him, a non-Jew needs to undergo a transformation of his soul in order to become part of Knesset Yisrael. Conversion is not just a matter of following a set of prescribed rules and guidelines. Rather, it is an all-encompassing spiritual transformation possible only for a select few spiritual gifted individuals. We know such people, I know such people. They discovered Judaism and they fell in love with Judaism and they hook, line, and sinker. There it is.
Yes.
This is an all or nothing rule. By the way, there's a teaching in the Talmud that says that converts are very difficult for the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. Now this teaching is not understood, unfortunately, by Jews that don't know how to read Jewish texts. It's understood as a derogatory statement, not if you know how to learn Talmud. Some sources do say that the reason why they're difficult for the Jewish people is because they end up being more devout than your average Jew.
Yes.
And it makes us look bad. Like this person just joined the Jewish people, and you, born a Jew, and if you ask somebody who truly converted to Judaism, they feel really upset at your Jew on the street who doesn't really care about being Jewish. Very upset. And this notion, I know such people, you know such people.
Okay.
And Rav Kook is saying that is a convert. Someone who converted just to marry somebody? Just because they want their kids to have a bar mitzvah? I said, what kind of conversion is that, says Rav Kook? What about this holiness of Knesset Yisrael? What about the qualitative distinction between a Jew and a non-Jew?
You know what's interesting?
That's what Rav Kook says.
But if a father says, I'm going to convert just so my son can have a real bar mitzvah and I can have a Jewish home, and he's not doing it because he so much wants. But look what he's saying is, I really want to do this for my family, for my children. I mean, that's a
Kook says, great, make a bar mitzvah, but I'm not going to make you Jewish because of that. So have your bagels and cream cheese. I don't need you. That's not enough. Making a bar mitzvah isn't enough to make somebody Jewish.
More than that. I mean, if he's willing to do that for his son, it's saying something about his commitment.
It's because he wants his wife's family to feel happy with him, and because he wants the spread. They want status in the country club. You have to think like Rav Kook for a minute, though.
I'm agreeing with you.
I agree with Marlene too, but you have to think like Rav Kook for a minute.
But you know what? What's interesting in this, Rav Kook is assuming that just because you are in this spiritual group, soul group, that you as a Jew born in for generations that you could trace back to King David are spiritual deep inside. My life experience is such that I have rubbed elbows with lots of Orthodox men and women.
I hope you don't actually rub elbows with them.
Maybe I need. When I listen to them, I'm like, where is your spirituality actually? I know you say your prayers every morning. but I don't get their spirituality in terms of how they live their life. So, it's a very interesting thing. Where is the measuring yard for spirituality? It's deep, deep, deep inside of each human being, and no one else really can measure that.
Rav Kook's answer to your question is, like you just said. Well, I'll read it again. Rav Kook says, conversion is not just a matter of following a set of prescribed rules and guidelines. Rather, it is an all-encompassing spiritual transformation, and this would apply just to Jews also. You can be, I'll use the word Orthodox, I hate that word. Orthodox, and guess what? That doesn't mean that you're going to be a good Jew.
No.
That doesn't mean that you're going to be totally all-encompassed in a life of Torah and mitzvot.
No.
It does make it more conducive, I will tell you, that to become all-encompassed in a life of Torah and mitzvot when a person is not connected to Torah and mitzvot is a very difficult feat to pull. But it doesn't mean that someone who walks the walk and talks the talk and does the do, doesn't mean that they're going to actually be the ideal Jew that we've been waiting for. But I'm not going to make you Jewish so that you can be like that non-ideal Jew. I'll only make you Jewish if you're like the ideal Jew. That's what Rav Kook is saying.
Right. If you want to get citizenship to the U.S., you have to study hundreds of questions that my husband doesn't know the answer to. He was born American. He doesn't need to know them. But I wanted to become American. I had to know. I had to learn. So
and how many years did it take you? And everybody complains about conversion, but when you have to become an American, I know how long it took me to be an American.
I watched a video once of somebody walking in the street and asking people, not like like people who you think would know, what is President Obama's last name?
Trick question.
You know how many people? These people walked around for hours and hours and hours and didn't find people who knew the answer to this question. What is President Obama's last name? Can you imagine? What world?
He's buried in grants too.
Right. In Mexico, we say it's like saying what color was the white horse.
There you go. But this notion is that, like Rachel is saying, in order for her, like in Hebrew, we say, who was the father of Yoshua ben Nun, right? Like that's Yeshua, the son of Nun. Now, obviously, his father is Nun. And Rav Kook is saying it's fine that you have today Jews who are not fulfilling their spiritual capacity to the fullest. They need to work on themselves. They need to work on themselves. But you can join the Jewish people as a work in progress. You can only join the Jewish people if you want to live up to that highest potential of a Jew possible. That's what Rav Kook's opinion is. Like it or not, this is the way that the conversion system in the world works today.
And in a way, he says, at the moment of conversion.
Yes.
That's your intention.
Yes.
What happens
afterwards is up. Listen, this is what Tamar brought up is an interesting point. Much of this book deals with this, which is how could you really ever know what's going on in a person's head? And the rabbis, the strict rabbis, they say, look, we all agree that you can't really know at the end of the day what's going on in a person's head. But if all the signs to us are there, then we're human beings. We're not X-ray machines. We're not God. But if I know from the outset that somebody says they're telling you their intention is not in the right place, so why would I convert them? So let's read this next paragraph. The last paragraph at Rav Kook for now. So, Rabbi Kook's Hashkafa.
Rabbi Kook's Hashkafa thus plays itself out.
Is imbued. The second one.
Rabbi Kook's Hashkafa is imbued with mystical elements. Given his understanding of the nature of the Jewish soul, it follows that he takes an elitist position vis-a-vis accepting converts. Only those who are truly qualified spiritually may enter the fold of Israel. To accept converts who are not absolutely committed to mitzvot observance is, for Rabbi Kook, a travesty.
So come back to the question last week of those converts from the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and the Israeli army who converted like that. And Rabbi Ovadia Yosef says they're converts. And the Ashkenazi rabbis put out letters about him saying Rabbi Ovadia Yosef is making non-Jews into Jews and and he doesn't know anything about halakha. Where are they coming from? They have this is where they're coming from.
For those who serve the army and are willing to die, I think Rav Kook would say it.
I don't think Rav Kook would say so. Because that's like Marlene. He wants to make a bar mitzvah for his kid. He wants to do something for his family.
Dying for the
I don't think personally. I don't think Rav Kook would say that he said it's a very holy thing, but not that that's the highest level of Judaism possible. as much as Rav Kook would have been a fan of people who serve in the army.
I agree with you. I don't think he would.
I don't think so.
No.
Now, the intention of this article, by the way, is not to disparage Rav Kook in any way.
No.
We those who are reading, are big fans of Rav Kook, including the rabbi who wrote this article.
Yes.
But if you look at Rav Kook's worldview, and you look at the problems that we are faced in the modern Jewish world today, you are going to have a problem following Rav Kook's worldview and dealing with the problem of the Jewish people today. You will. It's just what's going to happen.
Because it's a different world.
And today, the Jewish community is feeling the repercussions of that. We are. We have all kind of rogue people doing conversions just for the fun of it because nobody else is going to do it. We have all kinds of people who are having identity crisis because they thought they were Jewish when they're not Jewish. We have families who are half Jewish. What in the world is half Jewish? What does that mean you're half Jewish? How does it make a person feel when their father is Jewish, their mother isn't, their mother is Jewish, their father isn't? Let's say that somebody's mother wasn't Jewish. And he comes to the court and says, guys, I understand my mother is Jewish, I know my father is, I'm not expecting you to consider me Jewish. I'm not. I understand that you have rules. But at least make this process a little bit easier for me. Let me join a little bit quicker. I'm going to be going on birthright. I want to go to the Kotel, I want to get an Aliyah, whatever I want. Let it take 6 months instead of 3 years. Your court today would say, sorry, you're a non-Jew like every other non-Jew that ever stepped foot in this court. And this is the approach that's taken by the Orthodox rabbinate as a whole, specifically the chief rabbinate in Israel. Many of the Orthodox rabbis in America are simply intimidated by the chief rabbinate in Israel. It's a very big problem. How do you convert somebody when they're telling you they're not going to be Jewish? And so is it ethical to convert somebody knowing that they won't consider them Jewish? Is it? Is it not? But this issue is getting a bigger and bigger issue. As time goes on, it will become more and more of an issue. And we're not saying here that we want to cut on the conversion, make it easier. But aren't there people who deserve a little guiding hand, an embrace, a little push in the right direction? Maybe, maybe not. Rav Kook would say not, because they're converting for ulterior motives. Let's see what Rabbi Uziel has to say. Does Rabbi Uziel argue with this worldview that Rav Kook is sharing about conversion? Let's see, the next paragraph. Who wants to read this for us?
Rabbi Uziel too stressed the distinctiveness of the people of Israel. Indeed, this hashkafa is close to Rabbi Kook's, in that he also saw the people of Israel as the ideal model of humanity, embodying the highest form of harmony and spiritual unity.
So Rabbi Uziel is saying that it seems to be like he's saying what Rav Kook is saying, but he's not quite saying what Rav Kook is saying. Rabbi Uziel is not putting down a non-Jew over here as qualitatively lower than a Jew. But Rabbi Uziel is saying that, yeah, if you ask me, living your life as a Jew, imbued in the holiness of the Torah, is the highest form of joining spirituality and holiness in this world. It's the highest level. That's what he believes. He's a rabbi. Obviously, they wouldn't believe him you wouldn't expect him to say that Buddhism is going to be the highest spiritual. This is what his approach is. Although, someone else?
He says Hashkafa is close to Rav Kook's, but it really isn't. It's really quite different.
Right, and we're going to see it right now. Although
Rabbi Uziel recognized the distinctiveness of the people of Israel, he did not make the same sharp distinction between Jews and non-Jews as did Rav Kook. Rather, Rabbi Uziel stressed the connection between Jews and non-Jews, the connection, and the responsibility of Jews to set a good example from which the non-Jewish world can learn.
Keep going.
Rabbi Uziel, page 5.
Oh, it's pause. You're right. Here, that is the right place to pause. Okay. Rabbi Uziel is saying, listen, I agree with this whole thing. Jewish people, we're holy, we're good. But what about that connection that Jews are supposed to have with non-Jews? To help them change the world, to help make this world a better place, that we should learn from each other. We also have what to learn from the non-Jews, Rabbi Uziel says. So why are you willing to get rid of this whole relationship because of your attitude that Jews and non-Jews are completely different? When I was learning this with my wife, she pointed out something interesting. So it's easy for Rabbi Uziel to speak when he perhaps lived in a world where this relationship between Jews and non-Jews was respectful and cordial. Not where Rav Kook is coming from. Not from the land of pogroms and crusades, the lands of holocausts and mass murders, the land where Jews and non-Jews never got along, and if they did, it was only for not good things. doesn't mean that in Sephardic countries they didn't have their fair share of pogroms and massacres. It means though is that, luckily enough, the Sephardic world was pretty much had some form of working relationship with the Muslim population around them. To the point where, there are still rabbis buried in, for example, the Abir Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Abuchatzera, the grandfather of the Baba Sali, is buried in Egypt. In Egypt. The body of the Rashash, Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, the famous Yemenite Mekubal, is still buried in Yemen. Both of those graves have tried to be moved from there to Israel. And who is opposing it?
The Muslims.
The Muslims. Now this is not the same. This is not the same as the Rabbi Nachman of Uman grave. I'll explain to you why. Rabbi Nachman of Uman has a grave in Uman, in Ukraine. And there have been people trying to move it to Israel.
Oh, but that's a source of income.
The Ukrainians say, why in the world would we give up $1 billion, I don't know how much money goes into
Tourist money.
Tourist money every year to let the body go to Israel.
Yes.
So the Ukrainians are keeping it. Let me tell you that as much as I've checked, currently there are no Jewish pilgrimages to Yemen or to Egypt.
No.
Not to either of these graves.
No.
So why won't the Muslims let us have them?
Because they consider it holy.
Very nice. Those graves are Muslim shrines.
Same with Rabbi Shalom Shabazi.
Very nice. It could be the Rashash as well. Rabbi Shalom Shabazi is in Yemen. Kehillat, you're right, you're correcting me. Rabbi Shalom Shabazi, my father was named after him, is in Yemen. Those graves are considered Muslim holy places. If you'd go to Iran today, you could find in the city of Hamadan, Esther, Mordechai and Esther's tomb, which is a Jewish holy site. It's still open in Morocco.
Yes.
It's still preserved as a Muslim holy site. It doesn't mean, by the way, that the Jews in Iran and the non-Jews in Iran are best buds. What it does mean that, I don't know, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know of one grave in Eastern Europe of a rabbi that you have Christians making mass pilgrimages to.
No, they all stand outside and collect money and get water.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I don't know of any time in Jewish history where you had rabbis in Eastern European countries with a selection of Rabbi Rashi, and this is a much older time period.
Michelstadt has a grave, and there are non-Jewish soldiers, German soldiers who go to.
Really? Oh, look, I'm happy to hear. The Baal Shem. You have his great-granddaughter sitting at the table.
Oh, really?
The Baal Shem Tov of Nickelstadt, right?
Not Baal Shem Tov, Baal Shem.
Baal Shem. He wasn't a Tov, he was just a Baal Shem.
Of where was he from?
Michelstadt. He lived in Germany, and this grave is still there. The town looks exactly the way it looked when he lived there, because they rebuilt it the same way, or kept it up. And there's a grave there, and
Very interesting.
there were, like after World War One, even people would go there.
You know, the Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic Baal Shem Tov, was his predecessors were many Baal Shems in different regions.
Yes.
He was like the conclusion, the Baal Shem Tov. Like that was when you hear the Baal Shem Tov, there's only one. But there were many other Baal Shems, some good and some Rabbi Nachman of Breslov fought against very strong, because it was the early tzaddikim movement which happened in Eastern Europe. But with the exception of the Baal Shem of Nickelstadt, which
he wasn't totally, part of it.
Right.
The family was still cool.
The relationship between Jews and non-Jews in Eastern Europe was much different than the relationship of Jews and non-Jews in Sephardic countries.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that allowed for a certain freedom of thought, a certain sharing of ideas. And this perhaps is what's influencing Rav Uziel's worldview. It does not mean that there were not Sephardic rabbis who were of the opinion of Rav Kook. You do have Sephardic rabbis of the opinion of Rav Kook. But Rabbi Uziel is representing here the mainstream Sephardic approach to conversion. Let's keep reading.
Rabbi Uziel was critical of those Jews who taught that one's Jewishness should be a private matter observed in the home, and who said that one should be a human being when in public.
Stop. It seems like Rav Kook is going on a rant that we hear all the time at synagogue. Rav Uziel is saying, don't be a Jew at home and a human being in the street, because you have to be a Jew all the time. And that's not what Rav Uziel is saying. You have to, if you don't fall out of your chair when you hear what Rav Uziel is going to say, it didn't hit you how beautiful it is what Rav Uziel is trying to tell you. Keep reading.
He rejected such a notion as being absurd, since Judaism and humanity are connected and attached to each other like a flame and its coal. The goal of Judaism is to have Jews be the finest possible human beings so they could influence humanity for the better. Judaism was not a private matter, but was for application in the world at large.
Who fell out of their chair? See, until we read this from Rabbi Uziel, this idea seemed pretty New Age reform, tikkun olam kind of approach. But it's not. This is a very ancient Sephardic approach to the world.
But Jews will be the light into the nations. I mean, it's a very old idea.
Yeah, but Rabbi Kook doesn't agree with your interpretation of what it means to be a light into the nations. Neither do most rabbis. I agree with you, but most don't. The reason being that, now Rabbi Uziel is not saying, let's be influenced on each other, let's get married. That's not what Rabbi Uziel is saying. But you cannot separate us. You cannot separate humanity from Judaism, from Jewishness. We have an obligation towards humanity also. When someone tells me, I always hear rabbis get angry about the Holocaust. The nations of the world, they didn't come to help us in Europe. The friends, just like we didn't go help anybody in Serbia, we didn't go help anybody out in Darfur, we didn't go help any where were we in those massacres, the Jewish community? We didn't care.
We're a pretty small community compared to the nations of the world.
Doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference.
A pretty loud voice for a small community.
We didn't care.
Yeah.
And the reason we didn't care is the same reason they didn't care about us. Because why should we get involved in your problem?
But we do. Israel sends help to so many places.
How old is the state of Israel?
Oh, okay.
That's Israel. That's the Jewish people taking back their responsibility. But as a Jewish community, as an organized Jewish community, how often do you hear this term of humanity? Of Judaism being not just for Jews, but for the whole world. And that not sounding like a New Age idea. I'll tell you, I'm against New Age ideas. You know why I'm against New Age ideas? Because you have to find their sources. They always come from somewhere old. And when you make something New Age, then what you're saying is I'm rebelling against everything that came before. And when you do that in Judaism, it's very dangerous. I have colleagues in the rabbinic world that, unfortunately, because they're not Sephardic or did not study at all in their history, Sephardic writings, have decided to get involved in all kinds of, I call them borderline Orthodox Jewish organizations. They view themselves as the cutting edge of Orthodoxy. And I view them as, the Nebuchs of Orthodoxy. Why? Nebuch is an old Ladino word, by the way. For Nebuch is a misken. Why are they Nebuchs? Because they spend their whole life rebelling against people. I'll share with you something. A moment I also had with my wife when I printed my book, Yehi Shalom. Yehi Shalom, for anybody who read any other Pesach guide in their life, is, as someone told me, revolutionary. Rabbi, you transformed the way I keep Pesach. You transform the way I look at kosher. And that makes me very sad. It makes me very sad because nothing I said was transformational. Most of my sources were at least 1,000 years old. But what's happened recently is there are people who are looking for that new, fresh approach, and they consider themselves new and fresh, and they rebel against their teachers and their rabbis and their parents and their communities, but they still want to be Torah observant, so they make up all kinds of new isms and groups and categories and synagogues and movements and all kinds of things like that. And they spend their life disconnected from their past. It's either anger at their rabbi for saying we never want to see you again, or their parents for saying, we won't eat at your house because you don't really keep kosher, or their whatever story comes out of it. I said, for me, when I got my letters of approval, when my rabbis, both my rabbis, Rabbi Kati and Rabbi Peretz, just went up last night, and I had their approval on my book, which means they saw the book, they say, we agree with everything in this book. For me, I was saying things that other people were considering revolutionary, but my rabbis were saying, no, you're just continuing the approach that we've had forever and ever and ever. And what that did for me was, I'm not an angry person. I'm not revolutionary. I'm not cutting edge. I'm just Jewish. I'm just Jewish the way Jews were supposed to be. That's a very presumptuous statement. But I got rid of the need to rebel. Could be someone would want to rebel more than I rebelled. Could be. But what I'm sharing with you is if only people tapped into these writings of Rabbi Uziel, you wouldn't have to have all these movements that were trying to bring Judaism to a human level, Judaism to a global level, to a universal level, you just see that's the way Judaism was always meant to be kept. And that's the difference. They're
Not
doing the
everyone
same
agrees
thing.
with you. Maybe they have a different set of learned rabbis that they pull from.
They do.
Get
They
their
definitely do.
information.
They do.
And that's always been the history of Judaism. So,
But why
it's like
rebel
law.
against those instead of just joining these?
I don't think it's rebellion.
It is. It is.
Rebellion?
It is. Absolutely.
Everybody wants to have their own sect. Everybody wants to do their thing.
It's a reaction. It's a reaction towards something before
They're better
them.
than someone else.
I mean, but if you're Jewish and you don't fit in here, what do you do?
That's a great question.
So you don't fit in here. It doesn't work for you or your family or your children or whatever it is. So do you just drop the whole ball? Or do you go over here with 10 other families who are kind of similar to you? They also want to follow the holidays. They want to have a Pesach. They want to this. They want to that. But they're not like the group over here. And
Why does that group force people to be...
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Pushed out.
That's what we're talking about. That's what we were talking about. But I think that's the way it is.
Absolutely. Which
The
is
way
why,
it is.
why we're trying to present here for the first
So,
time in a
yeah.
public forum, Rabbi Uziel. How many of you
Right.
heard about Rabbi Uziel before?
No, never.
How many of you heard of Rabbi Kook before?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, maybe some people. Maybe some.
Yeah.
Through me. Why don't we ever talk about this rabbi?
Rabbi Uziel.
I'm guilty also. I don't even have one book of Rabbi Uziel on my bookshelf. Because nobody sells them. If I wanted to go, I'd have to go into Israel and find a special bookstore that still sells his books. Because nobody cares.
But
Because he's lost to the channels of Jewish history.
You know what, Rabbi? Most
The question is, I still in somehow the Sephardic view. I mean, they didn't have the yeshiva. I mean, you said like the Sephardim went to Ashkenazi yeshivas and they got absorbed and they got. Why wasn't the energy there
They
from the
control the
Sephardic?
institution.
Well,
Ashkenazim.
why?
The money, because they control the money.
It's like a conspiracy theory. You hear this?
From overseas.
You hear this? It's like, do you know the state of Israel today in the year 2014?
I know that they
Do you
were
know how many-
against the Sephardim, but where was the energy of the Sephardim to say, we also have yeshivas, we also
Great.
have...
So build one, and then what happens? Where do you get your funding from? Why would I send them to some new guinea pig institution when I can send them to a really old Mir or Panovich or Brisk or Lubavitch or some old established institution?
So the East European Jews had more funding to start...
They were established. They were good at making establishments. Sephardic Jews still don't know how to become an establishment. And whenever they try to join an establishment, they corrupt themselves. I have a lot of critique against the Sephardic community as a Sephardic rabbi.
Did they have big yeshivas in Sephardic
The model
countries?
of Sephardic Judaism was very different than that of Ashkenazi Jews.
Right.
There was no par here between Torah scholars and learners and religious people and not religious people. The Sephardic community was very much that. It was a community. It was a way of life. You're just part of this community. And the moment you take that community and try to transfer it somewhere else, if it doesn't transfer over, you lose that whole thing.
That's right.
And what Sephardic Judaism then becomes is, so I pray with a Sephardic prayer book, and I have a white talit instead of a black talit, and that's the extent of my Sephardic Judaism, is that I eat rice on Pesach. But that's not what being Sephardic is all about. It's like what would happen to a chassid if you took him away from his Rebbe and his community. Like what would happen to a Lubavitcher, let's say, if you took him out of Crown Heights and you didn't even let him come with a wife. You just took him and threw him into some Lakewood, I don't know, some Litvish stronghold of the world. Eventually, where's he going to send his kid to school? Is he going to make his own school? He's gone.
And that whole lake would become Kasim.
Oh, there you go. You see?
you're right.
So where is the momentum? You should know, by the way, that it's not just Faradim. There were schools of thought from Ashkenaz, from Europe, that were also lost because of this. Because they weren't part of the establishment. Because they weren't part of that mainstream group that gave them funding. And they also ended up disappearing into nothingness. I was once going to write a book. I'll tell you in just a second. I was once going to write a book called The Dustbins of Jewish History. Like all the people we conveniently got rid of. It's a lot of wisdom to learn there. For example, yesterday, B'ezrat Hashem. She puts all the pressure on me. Right.
Good. Take it out, put the pressure.
Yesterday there was a historic meeting. They have in Israel an organization called the Vad HaYeshivot, which is the Yeshiva Council.
Yes.
This council was started in the early years of the State of Israel as the one rabbinic body that would represent the main yeshivas in Israel to the Israeli government. Like a lobbying organization. AIPAC, but the yeshiva version of it. Right? They lobby the State of Israel for if it's funds, or if it's changing a law, or if it's letting their students do X or Y, or if the Ministry of Education makes vacation days on one day and it's not convenient for all the yeshivas, they'll switch it for... You have to have an organization that lobbies for you. So this Vad Yeshivot is made up of the big guns in the yeshiva world, like the big rabbis in Israel. And it's amazing to see, by the way, what that means. Where the bigger groups are outnumbered by the smaller groups, because the smaller groups, rabbis or politics or money or funding is much more powerful than the bigger groups. I'll give you an example. Rabbi Steinman in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky in Bnei Brak, two big Lithuanian rabbis. They're obviously on this council. Rav Kanievsky not, Rav Steinman yes. Rav Steinman's there representing his Lithuanian Jewish faction. Along with Rabbi Steinman are some 4 or 5, maybe even 6 other Lithuanian rabbis that are all representing different Lithuanian factions. What they call Litvish, Ashkenazi. It's not Hasidic. Litvish. You then have on the same panel, there was once another Litvish rabbi, Rabbi Shmuel Orbach, the son of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Orbach, the famous one. He in recent years has taken a different political stance than those other rabbis, and they've excommunicated him. And basically today, if you would vote for his political party, they'll throw you out of your yeshiva, or your school, or they'll cut funding to your institution, because this group has the power to lobby for one organization over another organization. And Rav Shmuel Orbach came to the meeting yesterday out of a stance of I'm still part of this group, and legally he is. He's still part of their non-profit organization, and he showed up, and nobody listened to him, nobody talked to him, he was just there. You're talking about a rabbi who's a very old man, a very respected halachic authority. Politics, that's what happens when politics joins the Jewish people. You then have, you have to let the Hasidim in, right?
Yes.
So you have to have some Hasidim. It's like it's a ceremonial position. So they allowed the 3 or 4 big Hasiduyot in Israel, which is, what did I tell you yesterday? Ger,
yes.
Bells,
yes.
and Vishnitz, and one more, Slonim. Slonim, I don't even know how they got in there. They're not even that big of a Hasidut, but I guess they have power, and they put 4 in there. So now you have like 6 or 7 against 4. So that's already, anytime you're going to have a Hasidic, non-Hasidic dispute, you're already outweighed. And then you have to have one Sephardic rabbi there, right? Because if not, how can you represent all the yeshivas in Israel? So they have one rabbi, Rabbi Shalom Kohen. He's the chief rabbi of Parat Yosef, the Sephardic yeshiva in Jerusalem's old city. He's also on Shas's political thing, so it's good for them to have him at the table. And he's the one token Sephardic rabbi. Yesterday was historic because yesterday was the first time in nearly 20 or 30 years they were going to vote new rabbis into the group. Because they have to get together as a non-profit to vote people in. So they got together and they voted people in. Not one extra Hasidic rabbi, not one extra Sephardic rabbi, not one extra rabbi from Rabbi Shmuel Orbach, but 5 new rabbis from the Lithuanian faction.
Oh, that's not right.
So when you ask me, how is it? Let's say you want to open up a new Sephardic yeshiva. You have one guy against 15 who's going to lobby for you. And so at the end of the day, it's a power game. Now, why does it work that way? I don't know to tell you why it works that way. Jews, bureaucracy, remember we told you we're the kings of that? The whole system is corrupt. And this is already, you can imagine today, there's a Sephardic rabbi in the board. I promise you that in 1948, there was not one Sephardic member of this board. And so when they came to Israel, yeshivas, the same way Hasidic yeshivas only sprung up later in time, not earlier in time. What? There you go. But I'll tell you the truth, is even if you look, unfortunately these are the not such pretty parts of Jewish history. I'd rather not go there so much. We have a few minutes left on the clock. I want us to finish Rabbi Uziel's opinion today, before we get to next week's topic, which is going to be about autopsies. I know that sounds like, what does that have to do with conversion? It has everything to do with how do you treat Jews and non-Jews. Are they the same or are they different? It's an interesting discussion. Let's first read about Rabbi Uziel.
That's for Julie. You have to wait for Julie next week.
All right. Rabbi Uziel also rejects. Who wants to read this?
Rabbi Uziel rejects the notion that Judaism could survive only if...
No, the second.
I'm sorry. Rabbi Uziel also rejects the position of those who claim that Judaism was merely a faith. Clearly, the people of Israel constitute a nation with a distinctive national character. Neither the Torah nor our sages ever divorced Jewish faith from Jewish peoplehood.
Jewish faith from Jewish peoplehood. Those in my Kuzari class, you understand exactly what we're talking about. Judaism, not just a faith, but also a people, a nation. This could perhaps lend understanding to Rabbi Ovadia Yosef allowing those who serve in the military a reason to convert, because that is a dedication not to Judaism per se, but to the Jewish nation.
Correct.
But if you reject this notion that the Jewish people are a nation, they're just a religion, if we're just a religion and you don't observe that religion, so on what grounds am I going to convert you to Judaism? Here's where you begin to see in their different worldviews, you begin to understand what influences their halachic rulings, their legal rulings. The next paragraph.
Rabbi Uziel rejects the notion that Judaism can survive only if Jews isolated themselves from the rest of society.
This paragraph belongs printed out and put on the wall of every synagogue I know. This whole paragraph.
Those who limited Jewish life to synagogues and study halls thereby were constricting the real message of Judaism. Constricting the real message.
We'll put it up in the Rabbi shul.
No, every shul, not just the, don't let's not sing language. Can I send it down to there?
No, we're fine.
We're good.
We're good.
Okay.
We share.
Please, sorry.
Okay. Rabbi Uziel argues that the Torah was quite capable of confronting all cultures and all peoples without needing to surrender or hide.
If you believe the Torah is the most truthful, the most powerful thing in the world, so who does it need to hide from? Who does it need to surrender to? Who are you afraid of changing it?
But in Europe, when there was so much anti-Semitism and the Jews stuck together in their shtetls, they remained Jewish.
That's a survival mechanism. Like a turtle, when he goes into his shell, he can't walk like that, he can't eat like that, he can't drink like that. That's how he survives.
They lived like that. They lived like that.
That wasn't their ideal.
Of course it wasn't ideal, but now when we're here in America and this doesn't happen, there's a huge number of people intermarry.
Would forming Jewish ghettos solve that problem?
I don't know. Some people think so.
I don't.
I don't know, but some people think so.
You know, Rabbi Riskin from Efrat once shared this idea. He said, what kind of Judaism are you teaching your children that at the age of 18, after 18 years of Jewish education and living in a Jewish home, you're still afraid that the outside world is going to change their mind on Judaism? Clearly, we're not teaching them the right things, or else we would be certain that they would never change their mind.
I'm not advocating for that perspective. I'm not saying that that's right.
I know, you're playing devil's advocate. It's okay.
Right. But you have to think that there is such a powerful influence from the prevailing culture. It is huge. And some people can thrive wonderfully when they're young in a Jewish environment, and they get out and they're confronted with all these things, and not everybody has the tools to...
How many Torah scholars do you know? There are. How many Torah scholars do you know? And they hit 30 and they forget this, we're dropping out.
No, that's why they're Torah scholars, I suppose.
No, that's not why they're Torah scholars. It's because they're Torah scholars that they don't drop out.
Well, that's
because not everyone is a Torah scholar.
Sure.
I mean, you teach at the high school. How many of them are going to be Torah scholars? At best, they're going to have a Jewish background.
So this is Paula, that's exactly what I'm telling you. A lack of Jewish education will always translate directly into a lack of ability to stand up against something stronger. If your Torah education is not as strong as your college education, then clearly your college education will prevail over your Torah education. It's simple math.
But that's
but
what
how
they're
many
saying.
people are that have no background? I mean, they are Jews. They know they are Jewish.
That's a background.
But that's it. No education, no friends, no environment. And they come in, let's say they come to the university and they come to college and they get so much involved and so connected. And they have no background.
That, though, would be an exception to the rule. That's not the rule. The rule is not that when I send my almost not so Jewish kid into the very not Jewish world, he's going to come out a proud Jew. That doesn't normally happen.
But then what you're, about being so strict and feeling so strict here that when they are able to come out, it's like they running away.
That's what Rabbi Uziel is saying.
That happens sometimes.
It's not conducive for the Jewish community to create little isolated Jewish communities.
Now, to be fair though, Marlene, back to what you were saying, forget about Judaism, but at every stage, children think black and white, right? Which is why when you give a child too many choices, they can't necessarily choose because they see right and wrong and they don't see that gray. But hopefully as we grow, we're able to introduce gray into our lives. And sometimes with our Judaism, we still stay with the black and the white. That either it's bad or it's good. And the answer is no. There's also good and bad mix. And we have to allow that to infiltrate into our system to recognize that we don't have to throw everything out. The world is beautiful.
Which is the next sentence. The next sentence.
Okay.
A living
culture has no fear of borrowing and integrating concepts from other cultures.
Correct.
And it can do so without losing their own identity. Jews can learn from the non-Jewish world and still remain faithful to their own distinctive mission of holiness and righteousness. Moreover, as a living culture, Judaism has a message to teach others as well.
Let's stop being on the defensive. Now Jews should go on the offensive. Why are we so much... Let's protect Jews from this and protect Jews. Why are we so busy protecting? Why don't you believe that you have the most powerful thing known to mankind and say, let's spread the wealth in your terms. Yeah, let's spread it around.
But you're talking in a perfect scenario, in a perfect world, in an ideal place, an ideal situation. And that's not the way life really is. And I'm not advocating for being a tight-closed society. I didn't come from that. I've never been part of that. I'm not advocating that. But I think that maybe it was a reaction to the way people really are. And it's lovely to say this, but it doesn't always exist.
So here's something I would like to share. I think that between Rabbi Kook's worldview and Rabbi Uziel's worldview, Rabbi Kook is the romantic.
Okay.
Rabbi Kook is the idealist.
Yeah.
Rabbi Uziel is not. Ironically, what you're saying is the other way around.
No, I'm saying
that Rabbi Uziel's worldview, this paragraph is what influenced Rabbi Uziel's worldview regarding conversion, as we're going to see in a minute. He's saying this is the most practical thing I could tell you, not the most idealistic thing I could tell you. Let's keep reading, you'll see.
Moreover, as a living...
To constrict
Judaism into a spiritual and intellectual ghetto is not true to the mission of Israel. The Torah contains within a full worldview of the individual and the nation. Therefore, it is our obligation to recognize and teach our spiritual ideal, and to try to increase our spiritual influence on humanity as a whole.
Period. This is Rabbi Uziel's stance. And therefore, because of the stance, he says the next thing. For Rabbi Uziel.
For Rabbi Uziel, then the distinctiveness of the Jewish people is not seen as mystical concept which separates Jews ontologically from non-Jews. Rather, the Jewish people have a positive responsibility of reaching out to the non-Jewish world to bring them closer to the religious ideals of Judaism.
And if that means, and I'm reading into this, and if that means that a non-Jew is going to say, well, I want to be Jewish then don't you dare tell him no. Don't. Because you can bring him right in. And I see your face. And this face is going to tell me, and I'm not sure if it's what it's really going to tell me, it's going to say, but Jews don't proselytize to the non-Jewish world. That's what it was going to say, right? Find me the Jewish source. Find me the Jewish source for that teaching.
I don't know where it comes from.
It's right. That's the thing. When things are prevailing views, you should always be very worried about them.
But no, you're not advocating for proselytizing. No. What you're saying is if somebody wants to come, not go out in there and say, say, come.
It is a positive responsibility of reaching out to the non-Jewish world. It doesn't say sitting and waiting for them to come to you. It says reaching out.
But not making them necessarily
But that doesn't mean,
To the non-Jewish world.
to the non-Jewish world, but there's plenty of things you can do to the non-Jewish world without making everybody Jewish.
Exactly. You know what? How many of us know people?
proselytize to be the Kehillat.
That's what it sounds like to me when it says that.
We have parts of our Judaism that are Jewish specific. Shabbat, kosher, tefillin, mezuzot. Jews need to do those things. We also have very universal concepts in our Judaism. Like you said, kibud avim, derech eretz, belief in Hashem, understanding that everything that happens in the world has a reason, understanding the whole, not stealing, all kinds of very deep universal values. Taking care of those who are refugees, saving those who are persecuted from other people. Jews have an obligation to share those ideas with the world. And if in the course of sharing those ideas with the world, the non-Jew says, I like this. I don't know what it's all about yet, but I like it. Yeah. Don't push them away, says Rabbi Uziel, because that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're right. You could answer your own question. That's not proselytizing. We're not trying to convert people to Judaism. We're not. But ideally, the Jewish world does believe that, there shouldn't be other religions. There should be, and I'm saying something very dangerous.
Yeah, you're saying something very dangerous.
It's us. We're saying that Jews, we have the answer to everything you're looking for, and you don't even have to be
Jewish caliphate.
And
Well, that's why people have hated us.
Absolutely.
Because it's taken us X amount of months to be able to say this out loud. They listen to one of us in 30 seconds and they figure it out.
We believe.
That's it. And they go, wait a minute, this doesn't work.
We believe that we have something to share with the world that they're not currently getting. And if they would only have it, their life would be enriched. And if you don't believe that, so then you have to have a question mark. So why are you Jewish? Why are you Jewish?
But that's the thing. I mean, if we feel that we are the chosen, that we are higher, we are somewhere, then obviously everybody will, quote unquote, want to be up there with us, and that's the ideal. But that
not necessarily. I see somebody who thinks I don't want to be like him. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I don't think. I mean, I think that Jewish religion is the one that avoids proselytizing at all.
So what I'm telling you now is you're wrong, with all due respect.
No, because if not, it wouldn't be so difficult to become Jewish.
That's according to Rabbi Kook. Rabbi Uziel, those of you who need to go, I know, but this last paragraph has to be finished.
And we will finish it.
If you need to go, please feel free to get. It'll take us just a few more minutes. This hashkafa manifests itself in a greater tolerance and openness when it comes to the halachic question of conversion. Certainly, it would be best if all Jews and all converts to Judaism observe the mitzvot in full. But since we do not live in an ideal world, we need to strive to attain the best results possible. Our first concern has to be to maintain the integrity of the Jewish people, Jewish families. Non-Jews who wish to become part of the Jewish people are thereby testifying that they wish to come closer to our teachings and traditions. Since Jews and non-Jews are all created in the image of God, the conversion process does not entail an absolute spiritual transformation of the convert's soul, but rather a pragmatic decision to join the Jewish people and to come closer to the ideals and teachings of the Torah. This hashkafa gives greater leeway to the rabbis, who must make specific decisions regarding conversion based on the particular situation of each case. Universalism and pragmatism on behalf of the Jewish people, rather than mystical and metaphysical considerations, should guide the conversion process, says Rabbi Angel in the name of Rabbi Uziel. He says, with all due respect to Rav Kook's worldview, we do have someone to keep the standard. Who's keeping the standard? The rabbis who are performing conversions have the right to say no, have the right to say study a little bit more, know a little bit more. But they don't have the right to say, let's compromise the integrity of a Jewish family. Let's shut down the doors to anybody who wishes to join the Jewish people, because someone who says, I'm making a pragmatic decision, meaning I plan to work on myself. This is a process. I want to grow closer. I'm not growing farther away. So now I'm doing it for the bar mitzvah. But you know what that means about me? That means that I came from somewhere where I didn't even care about a bar mitzvah. So for me, that means something. And maybe I'll even consider, lighting Shabbat candles. And maybe I'll consider coming to shul on Shabbat mornings like everybody else who doesn't come the whole week, but they come just on Shabbat. Maybe. And says Rabbi Uziel, isn't that grounds enough to say, let's open up the doors to? Isn't that grounds enough to say, let's open up the doors to Judaism a little bit wider to let in a few more people? Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue next week with